everyone, New York 11 and folks around the country and the interwebs who are joining us today. With everything going on, it has been a minute since we've been able to do a Talk About It Tuesday. But I am so excited to have Jordan with us today, a fellow vet, and we'll get more into, I'll let him introduce himself more thoroughly. Just to talk about what's in the news, what's happening, our perspectives on it, and some of the connections that we see and that we hope folks are making in this time between what's happening with Afghanistan and the infrastructure bill in the Congress and, people now dealing with new flooding issues in their homes from our most recent storm when we haven't even had real investments from the last storm that we had to address the issues. There is so much that, there are really layered crises and loaded challenges that people are navigating. And so we're excited to get into it today and to just speak honestly and from the heart as we do here as humans. And so Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to have you. And, just want to invite you to
happy to be here.
Great. Tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, how you got, a little bit about the work that you do and your connection to our district here and, kind of whatever else you want to share about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to really thank you for having me on. I appreciate, the opportunity to chat with you and get to hear more about your views on different things happening in the world and talk to you a little bit about, just being given the opportunity to present my perspective. So, I'll start maybe with what kind of drew me to want to talk to you and be involved in your campaign, and then explain maybe the path that kind of got me there, if that's okay. So I think the first, I heard you speaking on Radio Free Bay Ridge. I live here in Bay Ridge, so I follow them, and when you started talking, I was obviously this is a district that I really could use some new representation, and I was really impressed when you started talking about the views on the militarization of our economy, the way things are, the number of programs are willing to run through the military and not willing to run through, other places that, really there's bipartisan consensus for the most part on using the military to fund a lot of social programs, which is good, but it's really not the best way to do it. I mean, it's good that the social programs exist, but we're overly reliant on that. And so, I was hearing you talk really, I thought, represented a lot of views that I have when I talk to people. A lot of the ways that I try to articulate that point when I'm just talking to people, I thought you articulated really well. So as you mentioned, I'm a vet. I served from 2004 to 2010 in the U.S. Navy. I served on a submarine. I went to nuclear training school in Charleston, and then upstate New York. I finished the training, and then I was stationed in Connecticut for about 4.5 years on a submarine. So I was trained as an electrician, a nuclear trained electrician, and I really, kind of chose that job because I have a lot of interest in energy infrastructure, and it's a place where you can, learn those things and get training. So I joined at the end of college. I studied anthropology, really nothing engineering related at all when I was in college, but I thought it was interesting just to learn about the world. And then I decided that I wanted to learn something a bit more technical, and that seemed like a really good a really good place to learn it. It was 2004, so we had been involved in both wars for a little while at that point. And being in the Navy kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different aspects. I think there's simply the amount we spend on projecting power around the world is hugely expensive outside of the wars, outside of the live wars. It's very costly. And then when I came out of the Navy, I got a job working in data centers as a commissioning engineer. I won't go too far into that. it's not an IT job. It's really an infrastructure job. It has to do with HVAC for the cooling and the power supplies, because to keep everything up and running in the data centers. And the company I went to work for had a good history of hiring people who were from the Navy, and specifically from the nuclear training program in the Navy. And through that work, I started, I noticed that just a very large number of people all over that industry, in not just in commissioning, but in all of the technical fields related to data centers, the electrical and electronic equipment. Just so many of them had backgrounds from the military, one branch or the other. And, I think that ties a lot into one of the points you were making to begin with, which is, or that we started talking about, which is the fact that, one of the social programs we use the military for is just a jobs training program. I mean, we have, you look at all the people, there's companies are interested in hiring people that have skills already. They are not in a position for the last, I don't know, most of my life, they're not interested in training people or taking people who don't know things and teaching them. And the military provides that technical background for a lot of companies. And I think that again, they're good at it. I think it's nice that they provide that level of training, but it's really not something we should limit to the pursuit of war. I don't think we need to tie in our ability to train people for technical jobs with also waging war around the world. So, so I worked in commissioning for a while, and then I went on to work for some different larger corporations in kind of managing their building infrastructure. So that's what I do now. I work in managing infrastructure in large commercial buildings. We also, in some of the portfolios, or in the portfolio I manage, we also have some data centers that we manage as well. And after working, I guess, for the first company I worked for a few years, I decided that I wanted to go back to school, take advantage of the GI Bill, and I went to Columbia, and I was able to get, I ended up staying so I was able to get a master's degree in sustainability from Columbia. And then I decided to stick around and get a second master's degree in energy policy. And, I got out of there with fairly minimal student debt for a very expensive amount of education. And again, that's because the military paid for it. And, again, I think it ties into another thing we use the military for, is to allow some level of social mobility in the country by allowing people to access college that couldn't otherwise go to college and get good educations. And I think that it's just a very expensive and, morally dangerous way of doing that. We could provide much broader access to education for much more people without tying it to global wars. So I went back to work, and now I'm back to managing portfolios for companies in New York that building portfolios. So that's kind of a bit of a background on me. I moved to Bay Ridge when when my daughter was born. We needed a little more space. My mother was coming to live with us to help us take care of the kid, because both her mother and myself work. And Bay Ridge seemed like a nice place to do that. So I've been here since 2011, I think, and that's more or less my background in the district, my background for work, and a little bit about my military history. So again, just really happy to be here and talk about any of those topics or anything else a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And there's so much, that I'm curious to dig into there in your experience. I think that we've talked about how, I think like when you're in the military, you get healthcare, you get access to more affordable housing a lot of the times, just depending on your circumstances, right? You get access to all of these things. And, I think that that's positioned a lot of times as this like, well, you earned it because of your service to the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that sentiment. But I think in looking at, I've spent hours and hours on the phones with vets over the last week, from across the political spectrum, devastated, right? Trying to make sense of what was this all for, find some kind of meaning in what feels like, at least in the way that we withdrew, right? I definitely support the Biden administration's decision to withdraw. It had to happen. I don't think that more time would have been better, but I do think that, this was a lack of real planning and coordination and care for the Afghan people, and many people who put their lives on the line to save American and NATO troops repeatedly as interpreters, as other forms of allies, and to just the way that we're seeing this play out now is just devastating for a lot of folks, and they're asking kind of what was all this for. And one of the things I always say is when we say service, it's important for us to ask service to whom, right? And for what? And I think what what we have talked about, I know in the past, and one of the things that I know that is interesting about your own career path and your point about the military being a job training program is, imagine if we just had those kinds of training programs to be in service to the country, right? But in terms of building our repairing and building our crumbling bridges, fixing our roads, doing environmental remediation on the, millions of acres that need it across the United States alone. I mean, there's so many things that are needed in our communities. And, so I'm just curious your general takeaways on this situation. And, I think what connections you hope folks are making so that we can avoid being in this situation in the future.
Well, I mean, I think, I have to acknowledge, as I said, I was on a submarine. I wasn't directly involved in Afghanistan. I don't have a lot of connection to that, and I don't want to speak about things I don't know about specifically. But I think one way that ties in, very well, and I've heard vets who were in Afghanistan, talk about being there, and while they were there, not being clear on what the mission was, and seeing, equipment disappear, seeing, during the last 20 years of war, I know a lot of it's being made as we're leaving the country. Concerns are being brought up about equipment being left there, and that's a concern. I understand that, but I hear vets talk about being there for the last 20 years and seeing that happen. While we were occupying, that they would order equipment ostensibly for the Afghan military or police forces, and then it would disappear, and they would just be told to order more. So the point I'm trying to get to is and really connect this back, is that a lot of this is in, I think a lot of the point of the war, unfortunately, is in service of funneling money into military contracts and military contractors. I think I heard the percentage of services that used to be performed directly by the military that have been outsourced to contractors is just tremendous. And I think that's sometimes referred to as the Rumsfeld doctrine or something like that. But this is just funneling huge amounts of money into the economy, which, in a sense, I think is fine. I don't think there's a problem with the government funneling money into the economy to in pursuit of the interests of the nation. But I think that our interest in perpetuating wars all over the world is drastically overstated. And who is that really benefiting, and who is that in service to? I can think back to when I was entering the Navy in around 2004. The Navy declared that they were closing the base in Connecticut that I was going to be stationed to. I didn't know I was going to be stationed there yet, but there's only a handful of submarine bases, and they announced they were closing it. They said, we don't need it. We can, put these submarines somewhere else. We can save money. It's a cost we don't need. We can absorb the submarines into bases we already have. And the politicians got involved and declared that they, weren't going to let the base close because of the jobs it brought to the local economy, the jobs it brought to Connecticut. And again, I think that's true. I'm not in interest of costing anybody their jobs or their livelihood and the military support, but we look at the fact that we're willing to accept those, that as a fact, bipartisanly, we're willing to accept that as a fact, that, putting a military base in this state is feeding the economy, but there are, when you look at it, I think that there are many other ways that people can serve the interest of the country other than wars around the world. And I think when you get into, to tie back to your point about the ways you can serve the country, and earning, and earning the the right to healthcare, the right to education, all of these different things that you've earned it. I mean, there's probably, I'm not going to take anything away from the difficulty and the risk and what people put into serving their country in the military. But to be honest with you, there are plenty of other valuable ways that people can serve the country outside of the military, be it in fixing infrastructure, teaching, you name it. There's things that just put a lot more value, have better returns back into the economy. And I just want to close out that sort of thought about Connecticut. I think at the time there was a governor's election, and Linda McMahon, who's the wife of the wrestling promoter Vince McMahon, was running for governor of Connecticut. And I remember listening to one of her ads, and in the same ad, she was, because it was also around the time that the stimulus, the post Great Recession stimulus was coming out. In the same ad, she assured the voters of Connecticut that she was going to protect the economy by not letting the military base close, and also stated that she knew that only the private sector could create meaningful growth in the economy. So, just within the same, I mean, when it comes to the military, bipartisanly, we're so willing to look at it and say that, well, of course, this is a legitimate expenditure of money, and it grows the economy, and it does this, that, and the other. But I think, the militarization of the economy is so ingrained that we're not willing to look at that, that same kind of, it's the same kind of activity by the government could be used for so many more productive things. We're just willing to funnel so many things through. I remember you talking about the Army Corps of Engineers, and how when they were looking to deal with the flooding post Sandy, that was the first place we went. Let's have the Army Corps of Engineers fix this. And, that's good. They do good work. I mean, I think that I'm not going to take anything away from them, but it's also, that's they're part of a war machine. There's better ways to find engineers who can, provide civic infrastructure and perform these kind of services. So,
yeah, I mean, we literally, right? Like, I deployed with engineers. I've seen the work that Army Corps of Engineers do firsthand, and it's great work, like you said. And when push comes to shove, when it comes to getting what we need for our district, if we can get some Army Corps of Engineers, then we'll take it, right? Like, yeah. That's great. We need it. But I mean, it does, we have to challenge this, like, why is it a military? Why don't we have a civil corps of engineers? Why, when we don't have, when we have a pandemic, do we have to call out the militaries, as a backup healthcare and public health response infrastructure, because we haven't invested in an actual just civilian public health infrastructure, right? We've gutted it repeatedly, especially over the last, over the Trump administration years. And, I just think that this is case in point that that we should be investing in these things that our communities need, and Staten Island especially, but as well as South Brooklyn. Like, there's just example after example after example of economy stimulating projects that could be sponsored, that would benefit the economy and even the private sector through the training that those kinds of programs would generate, the same way it works with the military, but that would be pouring directly into constructive purposes. And to your point, about like you can't have it both ways. I mean, you have people like Nicole Maliotakis here, who's running on this Trumpism, right? This like America first idea, but who is voting against COVID relief, voted against the infrastructure bill. And I feel like you can't have that both ways either, right? Yeah. Like, you can't say that you are a person who is fiercely about our country and blah, 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 but then like block every effort that you come across that could actually benefit our communities. And then the audacity to turn around and take credit for, she gave herself a report card for an A or something for helping to disperse those relief funds that she voted against and tried to take credit for it. And, it's just, to me, I don't know. I feel like when you, and maybe it is something about, there's something about military service that primes me for this. I don't know, but like, I just can't unsee the connections between these things, right? Like I can't unsee the, just like, we're talking about also sustainability and infrastructure and our, we're dropping thousands of bombs a year that do significant damage to the environment. We're burning, our DOD is burning 10.3 million gallons of oil per day on average. Last time I checked, 10.3 million gallons of oil per day. Like, what?
Yeah, they often point to, I forget which countries it falls on the list, but they point to the number of countries that, our military alone, right, creates more heat greenhouse gases than, and it's really, it's just amazing that those continue to go. So, I think it's just, I think those connections are very real, and I see them all the time. And you just look at how, really we're so primed to accept the use of the military. There's the same thing I was talking about, the military wanting to close a base because they didn't need it anymore, and the politicians stepping in. The same thing happens with tanks, where the senators, the politicians require the military to order tanks that they don't want, that they don't need, that aren't related to their mission, and they sit out in the desert, in the U.S. deserts, and mothballed. And that's a recognition that pumping this money into the economy is in some way good, but rather than doing something that we can benefit from that has a return, be it healthcare, infrastructure, roads infrastructure, climate infrastructure, we're putting it into tanks that are doing nobody any good.
Yeah, I know. There was a similar thing with the F-22s. Yeah. Where the DOD was like, no, thank you. They are broken. We don't want any more of these. And Congress was like, but you will have more of them. And it's just madness. And meanwhile, this is the thing I think a lot of folks who haven't been in the military or haven't spent a lot of time with people, military or veteran community, is like, at the same time, right? Like, all of this is sold to us, right? No one is just, very rarely are people just like, yeah, we're doing this because corporate contracts, right? Or because of political power or geopolitical posturing, and right, like, it's usually sold to us as like, right, in the case of Afghanistan, it's going to help the Afghan people, right? We're going to do all of these great things for them. I believed that when I deployed. And it was, the global war on terror, as we called it, right? And yet our own State Department's reports show that in every place that we've invaded, their own estimations of terrorist organizations and recruitment have skyrocketed, in every single one are significantly higher than the pre-global war on terror numbers. And so that has not just been a failure. It has been wildly counterproductive, and it's made folks overseas less safe. It's made us less safe. And then meanwhile, they also sell it as like, oh, if you speak out about this, then you're anti-troop, you hate America, right? And I'm looking around, I couldn't get Wi-Fi to like complete the forms as an officer when I was in the reserves, but like, we are buying all these tanks, right? But like, I couldn't get uniforms for my pregnant soldier. I couldn't get, orders when I had soldiers that were literally homeless on the streets so that they could come in and have some income for a while and do some good work, right? Work that we needed done. So it's just, so much of it is so obviously, right? So it's not for us. And when you look at the fact that there's like, what is it? Last time I checked, it was like 40,000 active duty military families are on food stamps.
Mhm.
And so they're making, they're not even making wages. All those dog and pony shows, all those thank yous for your service. And yet you turn
Yeah, I
around
think,
and yeah.
I mean, and it's not new. I mean, I think you can, there's a book from, I think, World War One called War is a Racket by General
Yep.
Smedley Butler. I mean, it's
One of
more or
the
less a
most
pamphlet.
decorated, right? One of the most
Yeah.
decorated Marines, I think, in U.S. history.
And he just proceeds to lay out it's a great book. It's very short. I recommend anybody who's, curious, pick it up. It's just laying out the, who was getting rich off of the war, why the war existed, and who was paying for it. And I think I can think back to when I was in the military. Again, we were running through elections while I was there, and I remember somebody telling me I'm going to vote for George Bush because he supports the troops. At that same time, his administration was involved in trying to deny combat pay to veterans who were in combat zones. I think they were reducing or at least
Yep.
refusing to increase the armor that was in Humvees. They were, coming in short on body armor. There was just, all of these expenses, but the contractors are going to get their money. So, and I think that to go back to how it's sold to us.
Cut funding for the VA too. No, I just was piling on. cut funding for the VA on his way out, by the way, too.
And that's, I think that it was, I'm not sure. I mean, pivoting slightly to the VA, I think that, when I went back to school, I started using the VA, and I was my expectation when I went in there was that it was going to be like showing up to the DMV. It was going to be kind of just an unpleasant bureaucracy, and I didn't. To be honest with you, I was surprised from beginning to end at the the quality of service at the VA. I was able to get vaccinated when I got my COVID vaccine through the VA. It was very efficient and effective, and you leave without you don't show up and fill out 10 pages of paperwork, and you don't leave with get a bill 3 weeks later that you can't understand for $3,000 or whatever it happens to be. So I think they do good work. I think that if you look at and I'm not going to devalue or delegitimize anybody who's had negative interactions with the VA or has their own negative stories, but I think a lot of this stuff has to be put in context of the alternative, right? So if the alternative, the VA, like a lot of the military, has a lot of statistics, a lot of measurements, a lot of details. So a lot of the complaints, a number of years ago were about the long wait times. Well, there's no comparable statistics on the private healthcare system on what wait times are, on how long people are waiting for appointments, on who can't get appointments, who gets no healthcare whatsoever. And so when you put it, when you kind of look at the counterfactual and try to balance it against that, the VA on a number of measures actually does a very good job, despite and there were really legitimate issues with it. So I'm not saying those were made up, but again, if you look, I think that they address those well. And if you look at where a lot of the issues persist, they're in the rural South, where there's generally lack of healthcare services for a whole variety of reasons, and there's a high number of vets there. One of this just kind of a people connection. You and I have talked about this before, but I'll say it again about the services we provide to the vets. And what I see it is not what I see the services that vets get that are that they earn in the military is that they're these are services that everybody should have access to in the country, because overall it's a benefit to them. It's brings us closer to in line with most of the countries we would want to compare ourselves to, other wealthy countries, and ultimately just benefits society. I think one of my close friends that I served with has become a very successful banker. He went to college. He took advantage of the GI Bill, and he's very he does very well as a banker. And one of the stories he likes to tell me is when he's around other bankers and other people in that world, that they like to point to him because he grew up in rural Wisconsin. His father worked in a glass factory when he was young, and his mother cleaned hotel rooms. Right, he's the first person in his family to go to college. So as I was talking about, it really gives it is a way that we still provide social mobility in this country is through the military. So he's in these meetings, and people will point to him and say, well, listen, you're a perfect example of, how you can still pull yourself up by your bootstraps in this country, and that still exists. And what he, likes, he tells me he just really enjoys telling them, you guys have the story completely backwards. You're missing the point. I didn't pull myself up by my bootstraps. I had access to, I had the ability to go to a very good liberal arts college that I never could have afforded without the GI Bill. I had when he was in college, he got tremendously sick. He got some rare disease that took, weeks. At one point, I thought he was going to die. It took weeks of investigation in the hospital. He was in and out forever, and he left. He had all that treatment done at the VA. He left the VA with no bill associated with it. So rather than landing in $50,000 worth of $100,000 worth of medical debt, and not being able to go to school he can never afford, he was able to continue on with his life and become become successful. So yeah. I think that's just, again, you can look at these stories and say he did it on his own, but he's the first to point out he didn't do it on his own, right? He did it relying on these programs that allowed him to go to school when he never could have afforded it without it, to have health care when he otherwise would have either died from lack of coverage or ended up grossly in debt. And not to mention that we all just, quite frankly, get help from people along the way. I mean, I think we can all point to, outside of government programs, people have helped us along the way. So
yeah, but these social, nets, these social programs that exist, you're right. I mean, I think that it is a case study for the opposite, which is that it would be good for society as a whole if we invested in these things. And not only would it be good for society as a whole, what a lot of folks don't understand is, I've had mixed experiences with the VA. I've had good hit care. I've had really difficult experiences, but I also knew, in hindsight, that those experiences when the VA is struggling around wait times and appointments and all of these things, a lot of that is tied to the systematic gutting of their funding over the course of several decades. Right? If you're operating on a skeleton crew, it's messed up. Right. And have politicians turn around and be like, oh, yes, actually, you suck, even though we've cut your funding repeatedly. And, a lot of us, I think, have seen this in corporate America, if we've had jobs like that, where it's like slowly staff just keep getting cut and you're suddenly, you wake up one day and you're doing what used to be 5 different people's jobs all as one person. And you're being blamed for your inability to do all of those jobs with excellence. But all of that to say that also, the VA has to take on an outsized burden in meeting the needs of, veteran community, military community, and families, because we don't have a public healthcare system. If we had a public healthcare system like a Medicare for all that actually just makes sure that the baseline medical care is met for everyone, because you shouldn't have, call me crazy, but I don't feel like you should have to earn having your life saved in one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. I feel like that should just be something that we offer as a society, because we believe in centering human life and the sanctity of human life. But I think that, if we actually had a robust public health system like that, then the VA would be able to be focused and targeted and specialized and even more excellent at what they do, because they would be able to just focus on the kind of more niche or specific veteran issues that relate to veterans and the military community in particular, which would be good for everyone. It would be good for vets. It would be good for everyone, And so,
no, I think that's really, really interesting. And I think you can kind of, not to get too far into politics specifically around the VA, but I think you can look at what's happened in the military. We were discussing about all these jobs being outsourced to contractors, and see an analog in the VA system, where if you look at, as you mentioned, right, what's been going on as we've been involved in 20 years of war is that we have more and more veterans going into the system, and the budget's getting cut. And one thing that Trump did when he came to office was actually to increase the budget. I got to admit that I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but it's, he increased I want to say the budget by something like $5 billion. But $4 or $4.5 billion of the budget was for privatization, for private healthcare that the VA was going to pay for. Now, I think that that can be a useful tool for the VA to be able to have, especially when you look around at, places like rural parts of this country, a lot of the South, where there's, they don't have that many offices. They may be serving a huge geographical area with one VA facility. So I think it's good for them to have in their pocket. But you can look at it again as, I mean, the way I see it is the private healthcare industry is, championing at the bit to get some of that money the same way the military contractors do. And if you look at I think a few years ago, they, developed a commission to look into what should be done to fix the VA. One of the recommendations that came out was increased privatization. 4 of the 9 members of that committee selected by Congress were major healthcare CEOs. So I think you can look, I mean, again, they're slashing the budget at the same time increasing privatization. I think that's a great tool for them to have available. But one of the things that you can privatize these things, but the VA actually specializes in PTSD and a lot of kind of injury medicine that the rest of the private sector doesn't have and can't do better than they can. So I agree with you 100%. I think it makes sense we need a more robust healthcare system, and there's no reason to funnel, there's no reason to you should have to earn healthcare in this country. And ultimately it's better for society. There's people who, people want to be productive, right? They want to do productive things. They don't want to be sick. And when you get stuck into systems where you're in crippling debt, or you're just you're sick all the time and can't get healthcare, I mean, the first question they ask you when you go to a doctor is, who's your insurance? And if you don't have insurance, you're not getting any healthcare. So that's just the baseline. It's from a humanitarian point of view, as well as from a societal benefit point of view. It's just makes sense that we should need to have a much more robust healthcare system that everybody can use and shouldn't need to pay at the point of service.
Yeah, absolutely. So many good points. This has been a really good discussion. Thank you so much again, Jordan, for coming on and, sharing your perspectives and some of your experiences and your friend's experience, that story. Sure. I hope he keeps telling that story because it's so true. I think that I just can't, for me, it's just like, especially in moments like this, I'm just like, I can't believe that anything I'm saying right now should be considered controversial or extreme. Like, it seems extreme to me that you are, right, like you're potentially laying on the side of the road after an accident, and like you're trying, and like one of the questions you have to think about for your family member is like, is the closest hospital a public hospital or a private hospital? Because that's going to affect, right? Like, or is it in network, right? I mean, I think that that's just like, that is extreme. That is extreme.
Well, these things happen when you're unconscious as well, right? So you're sitting there, you're in the hospital, you're not in a good frame of mind to do anything. Specialist comes in that's, not who you originally thought was going to be involved, but they need somebody to get involved. And now there's, I mean, how many, 3 months later, you get a bill that you can't make any sense of and have no idea, what any of it means. It's very asymmetric information.
Yeah. Well, and that's why that medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Like, that's shameful. That's extreme. I mean, there's so many things. And to say, like, I feel like the things that we're talking about are things that are really just truthful and factual. And I think that they're things that are inconvenient for politician types who either, don't have the political courage to tell truths that they know, or are not willing to ruffle the feathers of their donors. And, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. As a lot of folks know, I was originally reluctant. I'm an organizer. I was like, no, I'm busy with my movement work. But the more I thought about it, I've just seen us, not just in politics, right? In the military, in so many different contexts, see leaders who, prioritize covering their own ass instead of really fighting for their people or for the people, and I just think that we need people who at least are willing to tell the truth, so that we can at least move in the direction of solutions. So, thank you so much again, Jordan. Are there any last things that you want to make sure to add before we head out?
No, I don't need anything else. I really appreciate you having me on. I enjoy the opportunities to talk to you, and I think that all the points you bring up. I think what's always really amazing to me is that we are kind of conditioned as a society to be comfortable, really across the board, with the government being involved in all these things, but only when it's being somehow involved in the military. And I think we look around and kind of breaking that mindset to demilitarize the economy and recognize that these things can be accomplished without having bombs associated with them is really important. So I think that it's great that you're running. I think, as you said, a lot of these, it is strange that these things get couched as controversial when you break these things down on a policy perspective. They're really not controversial as a policy perspective. But you look at then the priorities of the of people who are in Congress. The only thing that they seem to be bipartisan on is willingness or desire to constantly get involved in and fund wars. I really appreciate you running. I appreciate you giving me the time just to be on here and chat. So thanks. I really enjoyed it. And, good luck, and keep fighting for these things and telling the hard truths.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. And I enjoyed the conversation as well. And I'll see you around the district, I'm sure. And everyone, our website is on the banner right now, brittanyforcongress.org. Check it out if you want to learn more about what we're doing. And, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we have built such momentum. It has been so humbling and amazing to see the excitement that folks have for the campaign. And also, we're not taking corporate PAC money, and this is a grassroots campaign. And so we need all the support we can get. If you're able to chip in, whether it's a small one-time amount or a monthly amount, or, whatever you can do, all of it adds up and is so appreciated. And we are already putting it to good use, knocking doors, calling voters, registering new voters, and doing that legwork that it takes to really build a different kind of campaign and a different kind of movement, to elect a different kind of leader. And so thank you, everyone, and take good care. If you have questions, drop them in the comments and we'll try to get that, and remember to share so that other folks can tune into the conversation as well.